If you look at any problem in the world, you can link it to one simple thing, and that's poor and unethical leadership.
Leadership is about who you are, what you give, what people learn from you, how you influence.
Leadership is influencing and inspiring others towards a common goal. Leadership is not based on rank or position. Leadership can be applied at all levels.
Leadership is a proactive effort. It's rolling up your sleeves, thinking about how you can best accomplish your mission, and then working together to make it happen.
Leadership is much more of those everyday ethical decisions of people stepping up, stepping forward, and doing the right thing.
Leadership means different things to different people, but leadership is an essential part of law enforcement. The public expects leadership with every law enforcement contact, and agencies expect leadership at all levels. Leadership embraces character, respect, trust, duty, honor, and credibility. I'm Mark Bailey, and I'll be your host for this training. We often think of leadership in a crisis situation, but leadership is an everyday experience. And when leadership principles are embraced, they can lead to a more meaningful career and personal life. The goal of this training is to present effective leadership concepts and how they can be applied at all levels of law enforcement. The main segments in this training include our purpose, what leadership is, our choices, our authority, our courage, and our inspiration.
As a leader, you need to have purpose and vision to get you to your end state. Purpose is your goal, and the vision you have navigates you to that purpose. Great leaders instill inside their peers and subordinates the ability to embrace the purpose as if it were their own.
Purpose. It's the reason we do what we do. Purpose gives us meaning. The purpose for law enforcement, of course, is to protect and serve. Think back to the reasons you joined law enforcement. For most, it's to serve the public, to make a difference. Effective leaders always remember their purpose, and they have the ability to share their purpose. They have the ability to influence those around them and help others to renew their sense of purpose.
Report of narcotics activity, 8818 Adams Street. 2 male suspects in a brown over tan older Chevy pickup.
Newsflash, no kidding. 3 David 20, I copy, en route.
How many times have you been to that place in the last month?
Too many to count. This is just a waste of our time. We need to get rid of this call.
I've been thinking about that dope house. What we've been doing hasn't been working.
So what have you been thinking?
Well, it's a waste of our time to go out there every single day like we've been doing. I got into this job to shut down places like that. I think we can get a warrant to get inside the house.
Okay, that's a good idea.
Now, this is why I got into this job in the first place.
Feels great, doesn't it?
It does.
Putting the extra effort in to get the warrant was well worth it.
Definitely.
Even the neighbors are happy.
We have a few of these locations in our community, right? We all have some similar places here. What do you guys think of the officers? With regards to leadership, you had 2 different perspectives there, right? One, how would you describe the person who keyed the radio?
Well, in this scene, it's a common reaction. Officers are tired of going to the same call. They just want to go and put a Band-Aid on it. And he's realizing it's a waste of time.
Well, the topic here is purpose. Did we become officers to put Band-Aids on calls?
No.
What do we become officers? What were some of the words we used? What were some of the things we want to do? Some of the leadership qualities we want to display?
Step out and go outside the box and find solutions that's going to solve the problem instead of just putting Band-Aids on the problem.
Any other?
You know, we get paid to make good decisions and not to, kiss stuff off.
What are some of the results or some of the rewards from the community?
Well, they know that, after we go ahead and make a good arrest like that and shut a dope house down, they're going to have the peace of mind that we are actually going out there and doing the job that, we're paid to do, to protect and serve. And it's going to have a huge impact on that neighborhood. The foot traffic late at night, the suspicious vehicles driving around.
Being a leader and making that decision, what impact is that going to have on the organization? Let's make it even simpler. What impact is that going to have on the watch?
It's pride and unity that they've accomplished something. They've gone out and done what they've signed up for. Cleaned up a neighborhood, put bad people away.
You said what we signed up for. Elaborate on that.
Well, we started to do the job, what we, started or got into this job to do, to help the community and clean up neighborhoods and put bad guys away.
Now, him being a leader and making that decision, is that going to affect his peers?
It's contagious. I mean, their officers are going to start, taking the extra steps, cleaning up the neighborhood, putting a little bit more effort into how they handle some of these situations, if it's a drug house to a problem residents.
He said it's contagious. Is leadership contagious?
Mm-hmm.
How so?
Well, basically, the rest of that watch, maybe for that rest of the time they're together as a team, they'll have leadership within the team to go out and not just answer calls for service, but actually make a change in the community and hunt out the significant issues that are plaguing people around there.
We talked about as a watch. Let's take it one step further now. How's that going to affect the other watches?
They're going to see that, hey, graveyard weekends or day watch weekdays, whatever, is going out there and they're making the changes that need to be done. So they're gonna say, hey, we either need to step up our game or see how we're evaluating our own team.
So would you say this is a routine call?
Yes.
Yeah.
Would it be a routine call if that was your neighbor?
If it was my neighbor?
If that house was the house next to you?
No.
So, is it a routine call?
Not to the general public's eyes, it's not a routine call at all.
Is there such a thing as a routine call for the caller?
No, there is no such thing as a routine call for the caller because they basically wouldn't be calling if it was something routine to begin with.
Can anyone elaborate?
We get 3 or 4 radio calls like that a day, but that might be the only time that person calls the police.
And what's their expectation?
That when they call us, we're going to handle it and solve the problem.
And is that what we signed on to do? Solve the problem. Thanks a lot. Anyone has any questions, something we didn't cover, or you want to talk to me afterwards, feel free to get hold of me. Other than that, be safe.
In this scenario, it's a classic example of the leadership role that an officer at the front line there can play in trying to address the critical issues going on out there in our community.
He remembered. He went back and he remembered as to why he was in the profession in the first place. He says, I didn't get into this business to just respond to these calls for service. I got into this business to shut down homes like that, to shut down people that are raining terror upon our communities.
And what we have found is that the community applauds those officers. They're the ones I hear about, either through phone calls or through letters to the chief's office explaining, we've had this problem going on for years, and these 2 officers stepped up and they took care of us the first time we've seen that happen in years. Thank you so much for the great work of these officers.
So like most officers, when you are young and you're thinking about joining law enforcement, the reason why I became a police officer is to serve the community and protect those that can't protect themselves.
The feeling I had when I got sworn in was a feeling that I'll never forget. And it's also a feeling that I try to refer back to when things get rough.
Sometimes they forget why they joined the organization in the first place. And then they become maybe perhaps a little disgruntled. And unfortunately, sometimes people stay there. That's where I think leadership is so important, because if you can recognize that in somebody and draw them out and help them remember what their purpose is and doing what they do, you can maybe reignite.
Strong leaders, first and foremost, understand their purpose. They understand their why. Not only the reason why they're put on this earth to do what they do, but they understand the organizational why. Why do we do what we do? And they don't just keep that to themselves. It's not something that's just hidden and kept to themselves. That vision, that purpose is shared. It's distributed among everybody else, and it's shared. And they also allow people to be involved in that process of developing that purpose and developing that vision as well. You know, when you talk about, we do have an expectation. We do have a duty to go out there and serve. But it even goes beyond that. It's more than just an expectation and a duty. It's a calling. This is what we're asked to do. And we need to answer that call. We need to move forward and answer that call for service. True, meaningful service, not something that's treated as something mundane. You know, and understand that every moment you have to live with intent. It's got to be purposeful. If you go through something and treat it just as, okay, this is my duty, this is what I got to do, as opposed to, you know, this is an honor, this is a privilege. Not everybody gets to do what I get to do. Then it becomes something a little bit more special. And your great leaders remind their people of that.
The definition of a warrior is one who is intensely invested in a cause or a purpose. Are you intensely invested in this noble and worthy cause? We need our warriors who are invested in becoming the best leaders and the best protectors that they can possibly be.
You know, what does our community expect of us? What is the purpose that they expect from us? They expect that if they're in trouble, that they should they'll be able to pick up the phone, call 911, and people will come who will know how to help them solve their problems.
The community does look at law enforcement as leaders. The way we conduct ourselves when we're out on patrol, the way we talk to the people in the community.
So from an agency perspective, you're the leader in the field to the citizens, and also from an agency perspective, for all up and down the chain of command, you're going to be looked at as being a leader, no matter if you're the junior person on the department.
Police officers are the only people out there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. There is no other entity in the country that does what they do 24 hours a day, 7 days a week in our local communities. It's us. They look to us to say, these guys understand our community, they work in our community, they understand what we need. So we have this opportunity, really, in terms of leadership, to be able to step into our role as police officers and say, how can we collectively as an organization, at the front line all the way up to the chief, pull together and say, how can we collectively help our community be a better place? It's not just about solving the burglary problem. It's about doing what we can to try and help our kids in our community get a better education. It's about trying to see to it that there are all kinds of opportunities within our community for kids to do things and for adults to do things. It's not just about the typical things that you think about when you think about police work. It's about building a better community.
Your great organizations are led by people who understand and constantly preach the why. This is why we do what we do. This is our purpose. This is the meaning behind what we do. This isn't just a bunch of things to check off the box and say, okay, this is the what that we've completed. They intimately understand that how we do things are very, very important, and that how we do that in getting to our why and getting to our purpose is equally as important.
Purpose. Purpose is important in everything we do. What was your purpose for choosing a career in law enforcement?
Good leaders are, in many ways, they're never self-satisfied. They're never satisfied with just good enough. They celebrate successes. Your good leaders, make no mistake, they know how to celebrate successes and to seize upon even the smallest of successes and recognize their people for it.
There's a concept that is connected to purpose that's discussed by Colin Powell, and it's called perpetual optimism as a force multiplier. And what that means is believing in your purpose, pursuing your purpose with determination and vigor, and letting your peers and subordinates see that and infect them so they also believe and pursue that purpose with vigor and determination. So your purpose, your optimism becomes a force multiplier and instills and infects the individuals that surround you.
I think another great example of a line level officer stepping up and seeing a situation that needed to be solved or an opportunity to enhance a situation were two officers that stepped forward and realized if there's one place where there's a potential for threat in our community, it's our schools. And our children are our most precious resources. And these two officers realized in the wake of a lot of the school shootings that we've been having, we could do a whole lot better job of establishing a partnership with our schools so that they are better prepared and have plans and processes put in place and resources put in place where they can respond very quickly to an immediate action, rapid deployment type of situation. And these officers put together a outstanding proposal that went over training for all of not only for the department, but also training for the school staff as well. And so this whole idea of training and education and partnership, it came from line level officers. It came from them being aware of and observing what's going on in the world and what can we do to make sure that stuff like that doesn't happen. Or if it does, in the event that it does, we can respond to it quickly, we can respond to it effectively.
When Sir Robert Peel put together the first cops, the idea was they would all be officers. Only officers can give commands. Only officers can provide leadership. And the idea was from the very beginning that they were all leaders. They were all officers, officers of the law. Every cop is a leader.
Leadership means to lead, to guide, to direct others. An effective leader is a positive role model people respect and trust. Great leaders see what needs to be done and step up to get it done. In this section, we will look at what leadership means and the key components that make an effective leader.
One last item. Yesterday we had a bad car accident in the projects where a 2-year-old boy was killed. His uncle was leaving for work in a hurry and ran over his nephew. I know some of you were on scene there and it was uncertain what you had at the time. Traffic investigators came back and said that it was an accident and determined there was nothing deliberate in nature. It has been tough for some officers, but we need to recognize this as just part of the process, and we need to take care of each other in times like this. That's all I've got. Do you guys have anything? Okay, be safe out there.
Hey, has anybody talked to Bill? He was out there on the scene with me yesterday, and it was a pretty bad scene. You know, even the CSI guys were having a hard time with this one, and I mean, the family's just a total wreck.
No, I haven't talked to him yet, but I heard it was really bad.
There's something we gotta do to help out Bill.
Yeah, we need to take care of him.
What about the family? Can we do something for them?
You know, I've got ideas that can help out Bill, and we should collect some money for the victim's family. I can take a lead on that, okay, Sarge?
Okay, so what were some of the acts of leadership that we saw in the video?
The officer that said, hey, I'll take the lead in this, in regards to collecting money for the family.
Why did you see that as a leadership motion?
Because he's just an officer. I mean, you don't need to be a sergeant or a supervisor or anything like that to take leadership.
It's interesting that you said just, yet he's the one stepping up. So if we look at some of the qualities of a leader, this guy had to take a risk, stepping up to the plate, right, for these qualities. If we had to finish this sentence, leadership is, how would you finish that sentence?
Leadership is risk-taking.
Okay. Someone else?
Caring.
Understanding.
It sounds like we're talking about a lot of emotions here. And it's not typically what we see with leadership. Oftentimes we think of leaderships in a different form. Why are these words important in leadership? The words that you've described. We talked about caring. Why is that important in leadership?
Well, we're all one family. We all wear the same uniform, and if someone is going to step up who isn't a sergeant or in a position of...
And are there risks with doing that?
Yes, you're vulnerable. You can open yourself up to people's perceptions.
So it sounds like you're talking about some cultural hurdles that we have to get over.
Yes.
What specifically are there? You can elaborate. Someone can elaborate on that.
The stigma that law enforcement's, we're stone, we don't show emotions, we're able to handle all the business and move on without, really getting attached to it.
How can we change some of these?
I say just by talking about it openly. If a lot of people don't take work home with them, and a lot of people don't talk to their partners on the job about what's going on, but I think it's important to.
But do we take leadership home?
Yes.
How so?
Our families, when we get home, you take the leadership role as far as taking care of your family, friends. So it's still ongoing.
It's ongoing whether you're at work or off of work.
Yes.
Do you think the public looks to us as leaders?
Yes.
And what type of leader is that?
Somebody that can come on scene, take control. Somebody that will always do what's right.
I think you said two different things. You said take control. What does that mean?
Make decisions. Lead. The public to safety.
So that's, in a sense, what I heard the first part, the leadership, take control. It's the traditional method, traditional ways that we think of law enforcement. What about the other part of it where you said, do what's right? I think that takes us down a different path. What is their expectation there?
That they could trust us. And you mean, like, do the right thing is they're going to look at us and expect that we're going to do the right thing. So they're going to trust us and just follow what we're doing or listen to us.
So how do we start getting them to trust us? Or how do we build upon it, shall I say?
Consistency in our honesty and our integrity.
We're saying a lot of words here: honesty, integrity, caring. Are those words we traditionally think of in leadership, or traditionally the way we think of leadership? In some senses, right? I mean, a lot of times we look at the supervisor as the leader. But words that we're describing here is how we can all be leaders every day. And the officer described also taking it home. A lot of good input here, guys. Any comments? Anyone have anything else to add? Okay, be safe out there, guys.
The collection of money and the care for the officers originated at the line level. It wasn't a position, someone in a position of authority dictating that this must be done. This involvement from peer officers taking a leadership role is a great example at leadership at the line level.
By definition, leaders enable others to gravitate not only to them, but to their program.
Well, I think one of the problems, especially in law enforcement, that comes when we talk about leadership is that we have a tendency to always define it as coming from the top. Our leaders are our chiefs, our command officers, our commanders and captains and lieutenants. But if you really stop and think about police work and what we do, the face of a police department are those frontline officers and their supervisors. Those individuals and the way they do their job make or break the department.
And I think leadership is a lifestyle. I really think it's a lifestyle, and I think it transcends from your professional life into your personal life. Building genuine relationships is a huge form of leadership, because if you don't know the individual, how can you trust that individual? It transcends to trust, to believing in someone,
Trust means I can believe you. I do not have to stand in judgment. I don't have to withhold information. I don't have to be checking your motivation all of the time.
Trust is a part of establishing credibility in a leader. And sometimes it takes a lot of experiences, a lot of trials, a lot of errors to build up that experience, that confidence, and that trust from your individual peers, followers, subordinates, wherever you want to classify them.
Respect is quite different. It says, I hold you with admiration for who you are as a person, for the qualities you have, the knowledge you have, the skills you have.
Well, with honor, I mean, whenever anybody puts on the uniform and pins on the badge, there's a sense of pride and honor that comes with the responsibilities that we're tasked with as law enforcement officers. There's that sense of respect. And with leadership, you need to have that sense of honor, that sense of pride, that sense of respect. Not only respect for the position you hold to further the goals of the agency, but respect for the community, respect for your peers and your subordinates. And you need to show that respect and ensure that respect is delivered back to you to maintain and sustain the honor in the profession that we've chosen. Respect, honor, and humane treatment all go hand in hand with each other in the way we interact with coworkers and individuals.
You know, leadership for me, first and foremost, if you're going to take one word that describes leadership, I mean, beyond its ability to inspire. I mean, yes, there's a lot of people that occupy leadership positions, and your great leaders know how to inspire. But I believe that inspiration comes from one simple thing, and that's the word love. And, you know, a lot of people may think that's kind of a soft, touchy-feely kind of word. But I want to share with you a quote from someone who's not so soft, someone who's probably one of the toughest, most gridiron coaches to ever be a part of the game of football. And that was Vince Lombardi. He said, I don't necessarily have to like my players and associates, but as the leader, I must love them. Love is loyalty. Love is teamwork. Love respects the dignity of the individual. This is the strength of an organization. Loyalty, teamwork, dignity, respect. These are all profound things and profound statements of love, demonstrated acts of love. That really showcases to your people that you are leading, whether it be the community that you serve or the people within your organization.
In terms of leadership, we are making impact on people every day. The line officer, every contact that they make out there in the public, whether they're contacting somebody or just being in the presence of people and being in the presence of public, they are influencing, and the influence is immeasurable.
There are no ordinary moments. Every moment carries with it a potential for greatness, a potential to have a profound human impact on somebody else. And that's what your great leaders realize. And those profound impacts can be internal within the organization, and they can be external. But your great leaders are deep listeners. They are deeply listening and looking for profound moments of learning. As a listener, I can sit there and I can learn from you. And that's how I'm going to be able to identify problems. That's how I'm going to be able to find out what it is that motivates you. You know, empathy is interesting. It's just the ability to be able to say, I understand where you're coming from. It's not condoning. Maybe, so for example, if somebody does something inappropriate or wrong, you're not condoning it, but maybe you can place yourself in their position and understand where they came from when they did it in the first place.
Leaders should be empathetic and develop credibility. And how they do that is they're genuine. Because people know. People know the person who is saying the right words, using the right leadership concepts, practicing the leadership book that they read. But people will see through that, and they'll know whether the person is genuine or not.
For me, the one word that describes leadership is credibility. Credibility allows a follower to instill believability and trust in the one that is leading them. Without believability and trust, you can't influence anybody towards that common goal. It's essentially a core factor in the success of leadership.
One of the flagship mottos of what we say in public safety is to protect and to serve. That idea of service is right there in every aspect of what we do. And what an absolutely exciting and profound thing that we get to be a part of. I know of no other profession that where every moment, every call for service, every contact that you have with a member of the public has the ability to have a huge impact on somebody, and that we get to go out there and serve others.
The best leaders, as I was coming up through the ranks, are those who, when you walked into a room, didn't say to you, I'm your supervisor, kiss my ring. They were the ones who said to me, Rob, what is it you need to do your job well. And my job is to try and help get the tools, resources, and training into your hands to do that. So I'm about trying to help you. Those individuals who did that, in my opinion, were the best leaders I ever had, because they realized that their rank, it wasn't about their rank. It was about the mission. It was about what we were trying to do for our community.
That day when I took that oath, I became a servant. And I reflect back to that because that's what we are. We're here to serve.
On the day-to-day basis, my job as a leader, my purpose as a leader is really your career development, your personal development, the people that are working for me, developing them and ensuring that they become good leaders to replace me.
When it comes down to leading for the good or for the bad, it's going to be dependent upon the individual and what their motivation is. You can influence people towards the right path of organizational integrity, organizational success, or if you're a naysayer or a dissenter, you can lead individuals down a path of dissent or instability. So you do have that. If you have that charisma, that buy-in from individuals, you can essentially lead them either for the good or for the bad.
Be that life coach for others. I had a platoon sergeant that just took me under his wing and helped me and guided me and assisted me every step of the way. And what an incredible blessing that was. And for the rest of my life, I always look up to that man and think about men like that and try to do the same thing in the years to come.
Leadership happens at home also. You know, it doesn't stop. You know, I'm a husband. Not saying that I lead my wife, but I have to set good leadership examples, you know, as the head of my household. I'm a dad, a proud papa, and I have to set good leadership examples for my kids as well.
You know, effective leaders are, by their very nature, they are very strong, critical thinkers. And critical doesn't mean, you know, you're somebody that's there to critique every move that somebody makes. You know, actually, you know, the word critical, you know, comes from, I believe it's the Latin word criticos, which means to discern, you know, to have wisdom, to really think something through. And your great leaders, that's what they do. You know, in addition to being very strong critical thinkers, your effective leaders are also, they're lifelong learners. They realize that every moment, every day, there's an opportunity to learn, not only from that moment, from a book that you've read, from a memo that you've read, I can learn from others as well.
To better ourselves, I think we got to understand the fact that we will never know everything. We have always got to seek advice from others.
You know, another great example of line level leadership is at my agency. We had officers, you know, we have officers as just as any other agency that come in all different size, shapes, and abilities to be able to hold and be comfortable with firearms. And we had standard issue firearms, but that wasn't really effective for some people where the firearm was maybe too big for them. They couldn't manipulate the firearm as effectively as possible. And so the line level officers recognized that, and there were some officers that came forward with the idea of, why don't we put together a proposal that allows officers to carry the weapon of their choice, obviously within a certain set of standards. Yeah, so what we have now is we have line level officers that have stepped forward and they identified a problem and they were able to solve that problem by their own initiative, by their own problem solving, by their own partnership building skills, and they've made life and operation that much more comfortable for their own peers.
Leaders do not go along with the status quo. They either champion the good ideas and spread it throughout the organization, or they look at a flawed response and attempt to come up with some alternative creative change to make a situation better.
Life is a series of options, of choices. Every day we have the opportunity to make choices. Some days we make choices that, well, could be improved on. There are typical daily decisions we make which can set the tone in a career. In this segment, we will discuss choices, taking personal responsibility, attitude, self-awareness, and self-honesty.
Hey, that was good briefing training the sergeant did today.
Yeah, it was all right. Again, another 459 report pending for hours. I'm tired of picking up day shift slack.
It's getting really old.
They're always doing this. Whenever we go 10-8, there's 20 calls pending. I'm just tired of it, that's all.
Me too. Let's just head out.
All right. Hey, Karen, you know the crash that happened down on 4th Street? Just spoke to the motor officer who arrested the suspect. Suspect came back to the station, blew a 2-0 in the pass. What a mess.
Crazy. Hey, did you see that burglary report that's waiting?
Yeah, it's been pending for a while. I'm gonna let night shift take care of it.
Really, Matt? Just earlier today you were complaining that day shift left calls for us, and now you're gonna do the same thing tonight?
Ouch. Does that ever happen here?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Let's look at the male officer in this video, first of all. And what were some of the qualities or leadership qualities that we would want him to improve upon?
Break that, rather than complaining or complain about the other shift, maybe break that cycle and take leadership or initiative and try to show and be an example by, taking that call 20 minutes prior to getting off his shift.
I think usually the ones that are complaining about something are the people that are actually doing the same thing.
How do we change that?
By calling them out?
And that's what the female officer did.
Yes.
I think that calling them out's reasonable, but I think that being an example and then being a role model that I'm picking up the stuff at the end of the shift so that the other officers can see what they're doing. I think sometimes when you call an officer out, depending on what their personality is or how they might react wrong and it might set them off in a different way. I think being an example and her or being in a position where she said, I'm going to handle that call so that the next shift doesn't have to, and let the officers feed off you modeling that to them.
What about the method in which she did it?
She showed initiative and integrity on her part and brought that into the conversation she had with him. Maybe he should follow her direction and, do the same thing.
Do you think she handled it tactfully?
I think she delivered it in a way where she gave him some food for thought, saying remember what we talked about earlier, how you complained about earlier, about how the day watch shift left us with calls holding. I think she kind of just, put that, gave him something to think about, how he felt, and then how is the night shift going to feel when they come out, and that call's been holding for 20 minutes, maybe 40 minutes by the time they come out.
What do you think that does to their relationship?
Well, if they have a good relationship and if he respects her, then he'll agree and he'll say, I think you're right, you're right about that, and kind of give him a little nudge or a push to take initiative and break that cycle, break that chain of leaving calls holding for the next shift.
You mentioned the word initiative. The topic here is choice. That officer had a choice of to go to the call or not to go to the call. With regards to leadership, it's all about choice. What were her choices? The female.
She could have chosen to not say anything. She could have chosen to let the call hold that she had for night watch. So she had some choices herself that she could have made.
Who would those choices affect?
Everybody.
How is that?
The people that are expecting the officer to arrive at their home to take the report.
The community, good. Let's look at it on the positive side. When officers start confronting one another in a good way and take leadership, what are the results?
Well, I'd say it's contagious, and everyone starts to follow suit from what, the first person that planted the seed did.
Anyone have any other questions? You look like you have a question, sir. No questions. Don't forget to fill out the training request, drop them in the box. Any other questions? There's no other questions, guys. Just be safe out there.
In leadership, you have a choice to make the right decision or to make no decision. And for some, you need to understand that even not making a decision is a decision that's being made.
She had the courage to manage herself, to govern herself, and say things in the right way, and also to place some of that responsibility on her peer that kind of created that moment of recognition and awareness that, yeah, you're right, I shouldn't be dumping on the next shift.
Our goal is to strive for a higher standard than just complicity. the deep and true friendship that comes from mutual respect. And that deep and true friendship and camaraderie and teamwork that comes from mutual respect comes from every one of us striving to make the team as good as possible.
It's important for everyone to take personal responsibility for both our choices and our attitude because it sets the proper tone for a career.
So many times we like to relinquish that powerful thing that we all have, and that is to get to choose our destination, to choose our destiny, to choose our next step. Too many times we want to blame people for our choices. We don't want to take responsibility. It's easier to say, it's your fault. You made me angry. It's because of you. Too many times we let our choice, we give it up to somebody else. It's foundational to leadership because irrespective of what we do, we choose what we do. We choose whether we want to stay in an organization even if we're not happy. But more than likely what we hear is complaints about the organization that we're not happy in, but yet we're still choosing to stay there.
The concept of personal choice and the ability to choose a response is probably one of the underlying principles or tenets within the SLA leadership program. I have a choice as to what my attitude today is going to be. I have a choice about my demeanor. I have a choice about how I'm going to respond to a new policy or a change in direction.
We have the choice to respond in a positive way. It may not change the circumstance. The circumstance may continue to be challenging. It may continue to be negative, but we can change our attitude.
Negativity and negative attitudes can have a harmful impact on those around us and a department.
Dealing with cynics within our agencies is probably one of the most critical issues that we face in law enforcement. Of all things that we do, a cynic can tear down all of the good in just a short amount of time. A cynic is one of those who infects others, and as a result, they need to be addressed directly. So one of the most effective ways I found to deal with cynics in the moment, it's just you and your partner, and it's wearing you down, would be to ask them what they're going to do to make it better.
An important trait in leadership is self-awareness. To be an effective leader, you need to know yourself. You need to know what your influences are, your biases, your beliefs. Once you know what your influences are, you can take a step out and look at situations from another's perspective. If you can see things from different perspectives, it gives you the ability to make decisions through thoughtful analysis and not through influences that you've kind of lived with throughout your entire life.
People should have an awareness that they are responsible for the signals that they send out. And it's dangerous if people are not self-aware of what the cues are that they are producing, and that they should be not just self-aware, but decisive in this.
In terms of leadership, if you can't look at yourself in the mirror and recognize where you need improvement, where you may need to work on any given trait that a leader should have, you have to be able to do that. You can't just project out what you expect from a leader. What should they expect from you?
Personally, I feel that leadership equals ethics. You can't have one without the other. We always have to be sensitive to the fact that we're human, that we make mistakes, that we're not infallible, especially as police officers. Police officers, we pay police officers and expect police officers to be decision makers. Grasp a situation, make a decision, and make it happen. Well, that's okay. We need that. You need people to do that. But you also need people who, after the fact, will take the time to say, let's think about this critically and say, now that we've done that, could we have done it differently? Is there a better way? We constantly have to be recognizing that we're not perfect. We have to give the benefit of the doubt of those who are trying to learn our profession and do a good job. We have to be willing to say, let's stop and reflect.
Ethical fitness is the ability to not just follow department policy when you're being looked at or somebody's watching. Ethical fitness is the opportunity for you in everything that you do to live the standards of the profession, what that badge stands for when we raised our right hand, when we took the oath of office, and what the public and the agency expects. It's the ability to hold yourself accountable in the moments, to not even have the thought should I or should I not do something wrong, but not to consider it. And most importantly is the influence that you could have in the moment when it's just you and a partner on a call and holding them accountable.
Many times people, when they think about leaders or when they're thinking about leadership, they're usually looking at people that are above them, whether in rank, position, but in reality, we're all leaders.
In this section, we will look at the differences between power and authority. We will also look at the differences between management, leadership, and command. Our next scenario comes from retired Police Chief Rob Davis of the San Jose Police Department.
In San Jose, we have a situation where we have a large number of immigrants to the United States who don't have proper documentation while they're here. And obviously, a lot of them would be driving around without a license because of the fact that they couldn't get one. What we did have to do, however, is stop people who were running red lights, running stop signs, and had mechanical violations on their cars. And so we oftentimes would engage the individuals who were driving without licenses, who were illegal immigrants, if you will, in our community. The problem for us is that we were being criticized for the way that these individuals were being treated on the car stops. I would go to numerous community meetings and people would tell me, we don't have a problem if we run a red light or a stop sign, whatever the case may be. And we understand even why you need to cite us if we don't have a license. We understand it. But what we have a complaint about is the way that you're treating us on these car stops. You know, you're thumbing your nose at us. You're looking down at us. We've even had officers pull us over who we know speak Spanish, and they won't speak Spanish to us on the car stop. You know, we just feel like you don't see us as human beings, and that's the complaint we're getting from our community.
Sir, this is not a license. No es licencia.
Sí es mi licencia.
No, sir, it's not a licencia for California. Okay, just wait right here, okay?
In that scenario, you can tell that the officer was kind of frustrated, annoyed, exasperated by the situation. They can see those messages that we send, whether or not we're into what they're saying, whether or not we're frustrated by what they're saying, if we're annoyed or bothered by something, they're going to catch on to that. Now, in this particular situation, you had an officer who saw that there was maybe a different way. There was a different approach that could have been done, that maybe it might be more effective. And when officers have those types of ideas, they got to be bold enough and have the courage to go ahead and put those ideas into action. And on top of that, realize that when you do that, you might want to ask them their permission. You know, hey, do you mind if I go ahead and talk to this person? Do you mind if I go ahead and handle it this way? When you treat them with that type of dignity and respect and that they are a partner, the same thing that actually we are asking our officers to do with the community, it's got to begin in-house first. We've got to treat each other with that level of dignity, respect, and partnership before we start putting those ideas into play.
Hey, Vargas, why don't you explain to him it's just a fix-it ticket?
Mira, señor, nomás va a ser tiquete, okay? No vamos a llevar el carro a grúa, okay? ¿Comprendes?
It's okay.
It's very subtle what's happening here in terms of the problem. It's his body language, the way he's talking down to the individual. The ability to speak Spanish, but not using the Spanish with somebody who obviously doesn't speak English very well. These are subtle things, but these subtleties are what strike these individuals as being rude conduct. The second officer steps in, however, and he heals the situation. He treated that individual. You even saw it in the video. All of a sudden, the individual loses his fear. He gets a little bit more animated. He's more relaxed. He's going away from that situation, having a little bit more respect, perhaps being even more willing to talk to a police officer in the future because he feels like they've seen him as a human being at some point. Now, that's leadership. That's having the courage to step up and say, let's try a different approach because it's not only more effective for us, but it's more effective for the people we're trying to serve as well. Our job is to treat people with dignity and respect. Doesn't mean you can't enforce the law. Doesn't mean you don't give the ticket. Doesn't mean you don't tow the car if necessary. But you treat people the way you would want your relatives treated. And when we do that, we see the complaints drop. We see the willingness of the community to help us increase. And we actually find that we enjoy our jobs a little bit more. Our citizens and the residents in our communities do look at police officers as being leaders. And why is that? It's because police officers are the only people out there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. There is no other entity in the country that does what they do 24 hours a day, 7 days a week in our local communities. It's us.
Okay, guys, this topic here is power and authority. The first officer that approached the vehicle, what powers did he have?
Well, he enforced the stop. I mean, he got the driver to stop.
Okay.
So right there's authority.
How about the power to change perceptions, change feelings? Did the officer have that power?
Yes.
Did he use it?
No.
He did not. What was the difference between the first officer and the second officer with the use of that power?
The first officer was like he was kind of upset, or that he encountered somebody that didn't speak English again, and the second officer kind of used compassion and reassurance to the driver that everything was okay, or that he was going to be okay, that even though it was just a traffic stop, that he kind of reassured him and made him feel at least somewhat at ease that he was going to be all right.
What about his interaction when he first came up to the officer making the stop? Do we run risks asking those questions to other officers?
Yes.
What are those risks?
Risk that your partner or the other officer is going to question him as, why, this is my traffic stop. Why are you questioning my stop? You're just here to back me up, and that's it.
What are the effects? What are the positive effects of taking it one step further, as Oscar stated?
The way they're going to see officers from now on. So if he wouldn't have explained it to him and just gave him the ticket and sent him on his way, he's going to have a negative perception of the officer. Other than if he would have explained to him from the beginning, if he ever comes in contact again with law enforcement, then he knows that, hey, they're not just out there to get me. They're doing their job. Or if I don't know what I'm going at.
Keep going. You're going good. You're doing good.
Or if he would have just gone and explained to them, like, hey, this is why I stopped you, to fix a ticket, just get it fixed. You're not supposed to be driving without a license. Okay, they're here to help me. They're not just out here to get me. They're doing their job.
Is that person a leader? The second officer?
Yes, because he took time to step up and explain to the driver, or attempt to explain to the driver, why they were being stopped, to see if the driver understood why he was being stopped. Had understanding. He understood that the driver might have issues, not understanding what was going on, especially being a Spanish speaker.
And do we always do that? Do we always take the time to show a little compassion?
I don't think everyone does.
So I would ask, why don't we? What are some of the reasons that we do not?
I think we get into a routine. We're constantly making traffic stops, constantly coming in contact with people, and sometimes it's the same thing over and over. But for this one person, it could be the first and the last time, and it can make a significant impact on that person's view on law enforcement.
Any other questions? All right, be safe out there.
The police have to realize that they are in a hierarchical position as enforcers of the law. And therefore, every intonation of their voice, every fraction of their body language conveys something that is being scrutinized to the last detail. And if you want the police to be held in respect and trusted, then the police have to be that kind of person who obviously has respect for a person because they are a human being, not on any individual level, but with the courtesy you would naturally offer.
Now let's look at the differences between power and authority, and the differences between management, leadership, and command.
So when it comes to the concept of power and authority is usually driven by rank or position. It's usually delegated to the individual. Whereas power can be relegated at any level and is usually earned from the individual.
So power is something that we grant each other. It's not bestowed as a form of a rank. It's just something that is positional, based upon relationships, where authority is granted as a part of a chain of command.
There's some supervisory or authoritarian concepts that sometimes are used interchangeably: management, leadership, and command. Although they're used interchangeably, there are actually differences between those three concepts. Management usually deals with a position of authority. It's connected to a position of authority. It deals with handling resources, telling individuals what to do. It's connected to a supervisory subordinate mentality and really does appeal to the head or cognitive process in a chain of command type situation. Leadership is not rank or position specific. It can occur at every level. Leadership is earned through trust, respect, credibility, whereas management deals in resources, leadership deals in people. It deals with influence, and it involves appealing to the emotions or to the heart of an individual, whereas management appeals to the cognitive or the head of an individual. Command is an authoritarian type act in times of crisis. It doesn't exist for a sustained period of time, but you'll see it pop up in an adverse type situation. What's interesting about command is it involves some aspect of management and aspects of leadership. It involves telling people what to do. However, it also has buy-in from the individual and faith from the individuals that you're commanding. Just as quickly as command can activate, it will turn off at the end of a crisis.
Officers sometimes, I think, get hung up on this fact that if they're going to take a leadership role, they have these visions in their mind of these grand things they need to do in order to be a leader within the community. And it's not that way at all. It's the simple things that you're doing. It's the simple things about treating somebody the way you'd want to be treated on a car stop. It's taking the time to talk to the kid in the street and see the parents in the background watching as you interact with their child to realize that they see you as a leader. It's small things that you can do that make your community look to you and say, we like this guy, we like this woman, we're glad there are cops in our city because of the way they treat people.
In law enforcement, just because you can do something doesn't always mean you should.
And I think that's the world that we need to start transitioning into, is that, yeah, the law doesn't say, or the policy doesn't say, I have to go above and beyond, but maybe we should. Maybe we should take it a little bit further. Or, the law doesn't say I can't do this, but maybe I shouldn't. Maybe it's not a right idea. Maybe it's not in the best interests of our values. And your great leaders, I think, really understand that rules are not going to inspire somebody. If I asked you, hey, when's the last time you were inspired by a rule? You'd probably sit there and go, never. And that's the limitation of living in that realm of cans and can'ts. But what does inspire people is values. What does inspire us, those are things that people can believe in. Purpose inspires people. And inviting them to come along that journey with us, that inspires them. And your great leaders remind people of that.
It's important to remember that everyone wants to feel validated and appreciated for their actions.
I think it's just human nature that people want to feel respected and feel that their contributions to the organization are validated and appreciated. I think that's just natural. I think we all want that.
The single most effective tool to change human behavior is to identify something they've done right and reinforce that. Just all the negative, all the times you chew them out, all the times you've done bad, teaches what not to do. How do you teach what we want them to do? Find that time when it went right. Find that time when something went right and let them know it.
I don't care what rank or role you play within your department. You really want to know if your supervisors feel like you're doing a good job. And if you're not, then hopefully they have the people skills and the talents to be able to approach you in such a way to help you understand what it is you could do and improve. But I also think the peer-to-peer recognition is just as important. Remember, it would be so easy for a police officer to say, well, I'm not in a leadership role because I'm not a sergeant or lieutenant or a captain, whatever the case may be. Therefore, what role could I possibly play in giving recognition to a peer? Oh, huge amount of recognition you can give. If you're a brand new police officer, you've been out on the street for a year or two, and you have some 15-year-old, well-respected patrol officer who comes over to you and says, you did a great job on that call. Something as simple as that is huge to the individual who's really kind of struggling with whether or not he or she's doing a great job. The veteran officer who took the time to come over and say something to that young rookie officer was a leader.
There are many ways to learn more about leadership. A good way is to look at what Post has to offer.
One thing officers and deputies might consider if they do promote to the rank of sergeant is to consider perhaps looking into signing up for the Supervisory Leadership Institute. It's Post's Sherman Block Supervisory Leadership Institute. It's an 8-month leadership development program that not only looks at specific leadership skills, it also looks at the person as a whole. And many of the concepts that are covered in the program benefit you personally and not just professionally.
And one of the most important kinds of courage is the moral courage, to walk up to somebody and say, that's not right. You don't do that on this team. And what if everybody on the team did that?
Courage comes in many forms, and it's more than the courage to run towards danger. Sometimes it takes even more courage to deal with peer pressure, organizational pressures, or loyalty conflicts.
What's going on?
Mom, he's
Who else is inside? Who's gonna tell your mom?
Her boyfriend.
Her boyfriend? Who else is inside? Who else is inside? Who's gonna tell your mom?
She's
bleeding. All right. You guys need to take her to a police car, okay? What's going on? We got a domestic violence. She's bleeding from her face. I don't know what else is. Take cover. Take cover.
We got shots fired.
Shots fired. Shots fired. I need additional units. Code 3. Shots fired.
You see anything?
Sending back up. No. Where are they coming from? I need to set up a perimeter. Where are they inside the house? Who else is here with me? How are we going to react to this? How are we going to make entry?
We got an active shooter. We got to go in.
Okay, let's go.
What's up, John? Hey, I heard that Davis hesitated to go in the house for the active shooter. You know, if he was my cover unit, I would expect him to react a lot quicker and be on point.
Yeah, I heard he was really slow. Well, that wasn't the case. I was here, you guys weren't. All right? He paused a couple seconds to get his bearings because the scene was really chaotic. We went in the house, we did what we were supposed to do. I don't think it's fair for you guys to be out here talking about him if you weren't even at the scene.
The title here is Courage. Let's not focus on the domestic violence part of the call, but rather the conversation that took place afterwards, the confrontation. With regard to courage, what do you guys think?
It took courage for the officer to step up and correct the other officers for what they were saying out there in the field. They weren't there, they didn't know what happened, and they were already prejudging something that they had just heard about.
Why courage?
He could have just kept his mouth shut. He didn't have to stand up for his partner, but he did.
You said he corrected it there. Was that the appropriate time to correct him?
Yes, because before it started into a snowball effect and the rumors spread, or people started having ill feelings towards the officer for his actions out there.
What does that negative talk do to morale?
Brings it down. It's the rumor, spreading rumors, it's back talking, it starts to be a cancer for the organization and the team.
What if the officer that was confronted, being the officer that stood up, what if that was a newer officer? Might that have changed the scenario?
Possibly.
Why?
The senior officers probably would have felt that the younger officer didn't have a position to make a statement or to say something, but he does. He's looking out for his fellow officers. He's looking out for the team and the unity of the team. And with that one officer making comments and being negative, it's putting a wedge in the unity of the team. And it takes a lot of courage for that new officer or seasoned officer to step in and stop that cancer from spreading farther. And basically that's what the officer did in the video.
What about peer pressure for that new guy? Wanting to fit in?
It'd be very easy for someone that is new to a department or just got hired and wants to, fit in just with everyone else, not to say anything, for fear of being judged.
So you've been on a few years. How do we get over that?
You just have to understand that everyone can have an opinion, and if you see something that's wrong, you got to let someone know about it.
And that is leadership. In the first part of the scenario, you saw the officers. You saw them stacking up. You had a lot going on, correct? What were some of the leadership qualities, decisions that had to be made then that you saw?
I think one of the biggest ones was that he didn't rush into it. Took a second, figure out, get his grounds, see what he had, figure out what he had. He knew he had a team behind him. He wasn't running in solo. He thought about all the different resources he would need for the situation that was unfolding in front of him, and he made a decision with his team to go in.
Were there any other leaders in that group of three?
The officer that was directly behind him that kind of whispered to him that, hey, there were shots fired, to perhaps, if he was in some sort of state of shock or what have you, to click it back into gear, like come back to reality for a second.
Interesting that we continue to talk about leadership, and we have a situation, we have three people there, and yet you guys have described two leaders.
I think all three of them were leaders by going in and making the decision to go in. They're putting themselves at risk. They're making a decision to go in and confront the problem. They're using and thinking about all their resources that they're going to need. All three of them had an opportunity, and if not one of them being a leader standing out above, I think all three of them were co-leaders in making their decision to go in and determine what they had and solve the problem.
You're not always going to have the answer, but you need to make a decision, and you need to trust in one another when that decision's made. And any one of those three, or in this case, all of those three, were leaders.
In this scenario, there were a couple examples of courage. There is the initial courage, which you can associate with bravery of going into a hostile external threat, for example, an active shooter.
But the other thing that scenario also shows is a different type of courage. The courage to stand up to others when maybe they're talking poorly about some of our own. That act by that one officer of standing up and saying, no, this is not what we're going to do to our own. And it wasn't a moment of failure. Recognize the guy was just getting his thoughts together, getting his plan together. That him being empathetic to that and having the courage to be empathetic and to kind of counsel his peers that this is not the right thing to do. This is destructive. That takes an enormous amount of courage. When you really are faced with some of those challenges that confront you of, should I do this or shouldn't I do that, that you go against maybe the conventional grain and maybe conventional wisdom and say, this is the right thing to do. A great leader would do this right now or wouldn't do this.
Knowing where your fears, your beliefs, your external pressures come from, if you know yourself and are able to make decisions without the fear of those external influences and those pressures, you're able to be an effective leader and make decisions for the right reasons, for the good of the organization, for the good of the community.
Peer pressure is part of human nature. It takes courage to stand up to peer pressure.
Peer pressure is usually more powerful in terms of influencing choices than edicts from on high.
In law enforcement, it's alive and well, and to speak up to a peer when the peer may be doing something perhaps that is questionable speaks loudly to leadership.
Because one of the things we can have a tendency to do in our profession is eat our young. And we've got to not do that. We need to first help ourselves, and we need to take care of ourselves. And do we have the courage, the moral courage to stand up to some of that peer pressure and say, no, we don't do that to ourselves. We can't do that to ourselves, because if we do, we're going to be no good to the community we serve.
Undermining is not always done intentionally. You need to be careful in some of the things that you say or do. Consider when talking about others is to only say things that you would say if they were in the room.
And it's all about overcoming our natural human responses. A natural human response to blow our cool. Our natural human response to chew people out in public. Our natural human response to blame bad things on others and take credit for good things. It's all about transcending yourself as a human and taking those human limitations and just trying to do a little bit better job as a person every day. And you wake up one day and you find yourself in a really cool spot as a leader, as a peer that people respect and admire.
A leader is an officer who could see something wrong happening, who's courageous enough to go to a peer and say, you know, I didn't really appreciate the way that things happened on that last call. I could have done some things a little bit differently. You perhaps could have done some things a little bit differently. And so how is it that we could approach this working together a different way in the future? That's leadership.
One of the key aspects of leadership is that you've got to know yourself. You've got to know what it is I value. What are the uncompromisables in my life? You know, do I value truth? Do I value trust and honesty and loyalty and commitment and love toward my fellow man? You know, if these are the uncompromisables, that makes it a lot easier when you've done that. Those moments of self-awareness, those moments of reflection, makes it a lot easier when you come up against organizational pressures. When the organization maybe is challenging you to do something that may not be in the right direction, do you have the courage to stand up and reach down deep into what your values are and speak about it, and speak maybe differently than how everyone else is speaking?
When you do make that decision to voice your opinion in an unpopular situation, you have to do it tactfully, you know, and that way it'll be well received by others.
With a newly promoted sergeant, peer pressure can be a real issue.
In a situation where an officer is newly promoted to a sergeant, they're leaving the realm of a social circle of peers that when they now have to make decisions as a supervisor, they sometimes are stifled by the fact of what will my peers think of me. And the courage aspect and the self-awareness allows an individual to act despite the external pressures.
You know, one of the greatest challenges as a leader is that, and one of the most awkward challenges is that you've made that leap from being a part of the guys and gals to being apart from them. And that takes some artistry. That takes a degree of, because you don't want to distance yourself. You realize you are different. I am in a different position. Now my perspective has to change. People will come up to you and say, well, you've changed. Well, yeah, you almost kind of have to, because you have to think a little bit differently. Think a little bit more deeply and critically about the decisions and the impact that they may have on other people. But I also need to care enough about my people to not distance myself so much that I'm not completely apart from them, that I can still be empathetic and understand what their needs are and listen to them and hear what they have to say, because they're at the front line. They know what's going on. Their thumb is on the pulse of the community. And if I sit in some ivory tower away from that, I'm not going to be able to hear those things. I'm not going to be able to see that.
Now let's look at some successful traits found in good leaders.
When asked why they were successful or why the organization was successful, they almost wrote it off in one of two ways. One of the first things that they would do is they would say, well, we were just lucky. We just happened to be at the right place at the right time. It wasn't about them. Or the other thing that they would do that I thought was even more significant and more profound was that they would more often than not say, I happen to be surrounded by great people. It's everybody else that's making this happen. They never turned it around on themselves. So great leaders have this, they are incredibly ambitious, incredibly motivated, and self-driven type of people, but they also realize it's not about them, and they can't do it alone, and they realize it's about and for everybody else. And so that perfect blend of being ambitious and being incredibly humble, I think just are the hallmarks of great leadership.
Another significant issue is loyalty conflicts.
One of the things that we have found in many discussions with law enforcement supervisors and law enforcement officers has been about troubles that have developed. It's usually a personnel issue on the heels of an IA investigation. And what we have seen is that officers will put loyalty to a partner over truth. And they will cover for a fellow officer to the point of code of silence, and that never ends well. It's the officers should never betray truth over misplaced loyalty.
The core being of leadership is influencing others. So to influence individuals, you need to inspire them. Some individuals are born with charisma, that are natural orators and can inspire. But for most, it's through action. It's through treating people with respect. It's through building and maintaining relationships, either as a supervisor subordinate or with peers, and motivating others to do good work.
Great leaders have the ability to inspire others. In this section, we will look at inspiration and how to inspire those around us. Our next scenario is a true story from the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department and how one deputy made a difference.
In August of 2010, Sheriff Lee Baca wanted us to take an active role in a local high school in the local school district. It was it's called the Sheriff's Leadership Academy. And what it was is they were looking for a place to send students who couldn't be a part of the regular schools.
When I initially was tasked with going with James on one of these Tuesdays to go visit the classroom, my personal first perception was, what are we doing here? It was so chaotic. The students were so resistive. They were openly talking about how they didn't want us there, how they didn't like police officers. So my own attitude was, we shouldn't be here.
I noticed this one particular kid, and very quiet, but when I called upon him, he always had a responsible answer. And there was something about this kid. And I asked about his personal background, you know, and in doing that, I found that he loved playing basketball, you know, so that gave me another conversation piece, you know, to talk about basketball. And every time I talked about basketball, his eyes lit up. We contacted the coach. Daniel was excited. He ended up making the basketball team.
He went and saw him and, just to support him, to show him like, hey, I'm not just coming here to tell you this stuff. I'm going to come out and see you. I'm interested in you as a human being. And so he did. He's on his own time. He went and watched him. And right away he realized that there was one thing different about that kid. He had plenty of talent. He was out there playing with all the other kids. But the one thing that was missing was everybody else had nice shoes. Well, this kid's running around in scruffy old shoes, and it bugged James. He goes, "That's not right. What can I do to help this young man out?"
I told my supervisors what I had did. I went to his basketball game. This is what I noticed. This is a kid who's responding well in class. He's showing leadership qualities. He's responding to our objective. And I said, this is an opportunity. This is what I'm going to do. And I told them I was going to buy him some basketball shoes. And I'll never forget, my supervisor looked at me, and she immediately went in her purse. She said, here. Then another supervisor right on the other side, he went in his wallet and said, here. And collectively, we put our money together, and I went to buy him some Nike Hyper Dunks, some Nike basketball shoes. He had a hard time receiving the shoes. Wow, he just couldn't believe that the shoes were for him from us. I told him that they were from our staff. And I told him all along, we care. Police, we are the police, but we care, And when we can make a difference in the lives of others, that's what we do.
It was a life-changing event, not only for that student, but it was a life-changing event for the deputies who were involved, for the other deputies who see that, because they see that we actually made a difference in a life. This kid, it's huge. He tells his friends. Now, the impact you're having on everybody he knows, they go, wow, cops really aren't that bad. Law enforcement, those people aren't too bad. They're actually human beings. They actually care about people.
But it wasn't about the shoes, man. It was just about feeling the need, doing the right thing. Helping.
One of the students who was very vocal on the onset of us getting there, who was very resistive, who was not afraid to say, why are you here? You're the cops. He now is a Explorer Scout for the local sheriff station.
For me, the fact that it was just really heartfelt, you could tell that James was so sincere, made a big difference. What I've come to know since going with him and in seeing his interaction with these students is he's definitely a leader.
Okay, the topic here is inspire. What do we think of James' story?
I think that it's phenomenal, and I would hope that it would repeat itself throughout law enforcement, and maybe we just don't hear about it all the time, but it's pretty amazing.
I think it's a great story, and it shows leadership in its finest, that leadership is not always about success, but about significance and where you play a part in the community and other people's lives. And what James has done is left a legacy through the people he's touching, the basketball player, the future explorer, possibly law enforcement officer. He's given out more of himself than I think he thinks he is. And again, like I said, it's about significance and not so much about success and where that's going to take him, but what it's going to do for the people that he's touching. And that'll also affect the officers that are around him, because they'll see that, and that it'll mentor and model to them his significance and what he's done, and they'll all want to take a part of it.
A lot of times when we think of leadership, we think of leadership as spoken, as direction. In this case, was leadership spoken?
No, I think it was seen more in his actions and taking his time to go see him play, or actually continuing to teach the class, even though at the beginning he was getting a negative response from the students.
I see it as quiet leadership, as far as he's not bragging about it. He's not showcasing what he's doing. He's not, he's being honest. He's being sincere. He's doing from his heart what he should do. And a lot of times that's what leadership is. You're not boasting about what you're doing or how you're doing it. You're just quietly doing it behind the scenes, and you might not get any credit for it, but you are still, the foundation of a leader by doing that.
How does this carry over to us in the everyday patrol, driving around? We're not saying anything, but we're driving around in a patrol car in a uniform.
By encountering the same kids that he's teaching, we might stop one of them later, or one of their family members, and the response that they're going to have towards us is probably going to be different than it would have been otherwise.
How long does it take to become a leader?
Leadership is more of a journey. It's never, there's no time limit on it. You're always searching for it. You're always striving and continuing to learn on how to be a leader, or to better yourself, to be a better leader. There's no time limit in leadership. It could be your whole life. It could take you to reach, wherever goal you're set to.
So can tell me, how do leaders motivate? We heard the James story and how he motivated. How do leaders motivate?
By example.
What about when your peers do something that's really good, or show themselves as a leader?
You can applaud them and support them.
How do you support them?
By reinforcing that their ideas, or that's a good idea, that their actions are good, and by supporting them, by asking them if they need any assistance, just some positive reinforcement.
That was good. A lot of input there, guys. I encourage you to keep talking about these things, constantly reevaluating yourselves, and think of the things that you guys said today, and carry those behaviors with you every day, because the community's watching you, and you are leaders.
Very effective leaders do something that a lot of very ineffective managers can't do or don't do is that they truly understand human motivation. They understand that people are not just motivated by extrinsic rewards, these carrots and sticks. If you do this, then I'll do that for you. Or if you don't do this, or if then this is what's going to happen to you. They realize that human beings are a lot deeper than that. They want to know that they're a part of something big and profound. If you want to create a great motivational environment for your people, give them 3 things. Number 1, autonomy. Give them autonomy over the time, the task, the technique that they use, which sometimes we can't do in law enforcement. There's certain techniques that we've got to use because they're tried and true and time tested, and this is the safest and best way to go. But there's some things that maybe we could do differently, that if we just kind of shifted our lens and how we looked at things, that we could maybe do things different. The next thing he talked about was mastery. This idea that we just like to get good at things. Cops want to learn. And then finally, purpose. Great leaders understand the purpose of the organization, and they're constantly reminding people that you're not just a cog in the wheel, you're the cog in the wheel.
I think one of the biggest challenges for police managers, if you will, is how do you go about motivating your police officers and perhaps effecting change when change is needed? And clearly leadership plays a role. If you don't have the trust and respect of your subordinates, you can crow about what you want, change as much as you want, but it won't really happen because people perhaps don't sense that you want to effect that change for the right reason. So I think the key thing here is to be courageous enough as a leader to say, first of all, have I earned the respect of my subordinates so that when I go in there and try and affect this change, they'll listen to me? But do they sense that I am willing to hear them out and get their input as I try and sell my case to them, if you will, for that change? My experience has been that when you do that, when you're trying to do the right things for the right reasons and you've gained the respect of your subordinates, you will be able to get them all on board.
You know what? Leadership is also about recognizing your partners, acknowledging them. Recognition from a peer is huge because that's who you're in the trenches with. That's who you're on the front line with. That's who's rolling with you to that call at 0100 in the morning in that alley, you know. And to get an attaboy or just a thank you or just to show that you're acknowledged it's huge.
You know, we have a mentoring program in our agency, one of the few of its kind, and that came from a line level officer where we recognize, hey, we need to do a better job of mentoring new people that come into our organization, getting them familiar with the culture, and offering kind of a warm and encouraging and extending hand on how to be successful in this organization. There was an officer that recognized that we needed that. And now that's a program that's very successful. We now have a new rank in our organization, corporal. Recognize that making that leap from going from just a line level officer to a sergeant, that's a big leap. That's a big leap. And maybe we could create some promotional opportunities and some supervisory opportunities for our people and mentoring opportunities that that we needed to place in the middle. And so again, came from the line level, a group of officers that said, we need to have more, we could do better, and created the corporal rank or the corporal position. The AR-15s that we now have in our vehicles, that came from proposals that were written by line-level officers.
In our communities, there are many opportunities to make a difference and many examples that demonstrate how line-level peace officers have stepped up to get the job done.
An agency that I'm reminded of where the traditional approach wasn't working, where they would do a sting, they'd round up prostitutes, put them in jail, but then they'd be right back out at the same corner doing the same thing all over again. The officers themselves wanted to research it and find out, hey, are there other agencies that have maybe come up with a solution to this type of problem? And they found one, and it was actually a Florida agency where they took a different approach. What they did was they partnered with the district attorney, they partnered with judges, and they were able to write ordinances that added as a condition of their probation once they were arrested that would keep them from frequenting high crime areas. And so it was a very specific little nuance and a specific condition that prevented them from going back to that same area. This came from line level. It didn't come from up on high. This came at the line level where, and let's face it, it's called the operational level for a reason. There's nobody better than a line level officer that knows the operations and how things work or how things are not working. There's absolute brilliance in our agencies as long as we allow them the opportunity to put those ideas into action.
In a way, law enforcement really has the greatest opportunity of all for self-improvement, because they face the greatest challenges every day. If you can face what the law enforcement world has to give to you, if you can face the worst of our society and people at their worst and people in their worst times, if you can walk out there every day and face the worst that society has to give and maintain your calm and maintain your cool, what an amazing human being you can become.
This course is designed to be facilitated in a group setting. Before conducting a group training session, you should review and become familiar with the material in this program. Open and print the facilitator guide and go through the material yourself before putting the course on for others. As the facilitator, your job is to engage your students in constructive, free-flowing discussion on the key learning points in this training topic, stimulate critical thinking and situational awareness in the group by viewing the scenarios, expert interviews, and discussion videos. Questions and activities are provided to promote group interaction and discussion on the training topic. Customize the learning experience by applying your agency policy and procedures to the training concepts. Segments in this program accommodate shorter training periods, such as during roll call training sessions. Track your students' progress through the entire program. Once the students have successfully completed the program, submit your training roster to post for CPT credit. Following this plan will help to create an environment for the debate of ideas, sharing of wisdom based on experience, and encourage a greater understanding of local policies and procedures. We wish you and your agency all the best in successfully implementing this program. This course is designed to be facilitated in a group setting. However, when that is not possible, here are some instructions for getting the most out of this training program so that you may receive continuing professional training or CPT credit. Let your supervisor know that you will be viewing the program. This will give them some time to review the course themselves and be prepared to discuss it with you later on. Open and print the student workbook so you can take notes and fill out responses to the questions and activities. Think about how the training concepts presented apply to your agency policy and procedures. You may view the scenarios, expert interviews, and discussion videos several times to assist you in providing responses. Keep track of your progress as you complete segments in the course. When you have finished the entire program, inform your supervisor that you would like to review the course with them. Send them your completed student workbook prior to meetings so that they have a chance to review your responses. Your supervisor may require additional work or feedback from you before giving CPT credit. It is up to their discretion to determine whether you have adequately completed the course. Following these instructions will give you the best opportunity not only to receive CPT credit, but to grasp the training concepts, benefit from the experience of others, and apply the training and experience to your local policy and procedures. We wish you and your agency all the best in successfully completing this course. We've come to the end of our training. On behalf of the Commission on Peace Officer Standards and Training, we'd like to thank you for your participation.